put black here usually. There's usually a little
Yeah,
bit of
you're
black.
looking a little great
I don't
today.
want anyone to know I'm old. So, oh my God, we started. Hey, stupid. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Tellman Show.
That's right.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Tellman and Fellman Show. My name's Harris Fellman, and the other bald guy over there.
Hey, I'm Tellman Knutson. Welcome to episode 43. Special guest, Travis Ketchum. What do you have to say about Travis, Harris?
Well, first of all, the reason I have Travis on is because I'm doing consulting work for Warrior Plus, and Mike Lance, the owner of Warrior Plus, was like, "Hey, check this stream out, this recorded interview that he had done with somebody else." And I was like, "Man, that's some really good info." And we've been like, so many people that we talk to, it intertwines with email deliverability and email and whatever. So I'm like, we got to have him on, but we're still going to do the same normal thing. Don't worry, viewers, we're still going to do the same normal thing, and we're going to get his origin story and everything like that. So I will tell you that Travis Ketchum is the founder of Campaign Refineries. For those of you that don't know, which is an email
refinery.
Did I not say? I said Campaign Refinery.
That's right.
He's got it under his. He's got it right there. They'll figure it out.
He does indeed.
Wow, an email platform delivering billions of emails for top performing businesses with an open rate of that's 2 times. Wow, I didn't know this. That's 2 times the industry average. From helping businesses like Alex Hormozy, his gym launch business, add $3.6 million in net new sales in the first 12 months, to scaling consumer brands, email programs, to otherworldly results as well. Travis's set of tools and strategies and knowledge, he didn't write that in, but I'm putting it in, are key to the way elite businesses do email. So we're super excited to have you, Travis. Thanks for agreeing to be on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Right on. So let's just jump into it. Let's before we get. I'm promising everybody content. In case Mike Lance watches this, you're gonna hear his origin story. You like that stuff, I know you do. But everybody else, in case you don't, which I think you do, we like thinking about how do people get started. So what's your origin story? Like I know about. You had like you were one of the pioneers for the giveaways as contest giveaway as well. But how did you get in even before that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can do an elevator, pitch version, short version of like the really deep origin story, and then we can talk into like how I actually got into this game specifically. I've always been a kind of an entrepreneur, opportunity-minded person. I was the person, washing cars, had a paper route, mowing yards, but it's like I was even at like a young age, I was smart enough to be like, well, what was this job worth to you this time, right? I was always already playing with pricing and
Right.
And it got to the point that my best paying customer wouldn't let me come mow his yard again until I looked up the word entrepreneurship in the dictionary. He's like, "You are forbidden from coming back until you look up the word entrepreneur in the dictionary."
Nice.
So it's kind of my DNA to a certain extent, and I've always been interested in technology. I remember it was about 3rd grade. A neighbor gave me an old Windows PC, and I tore it apart, like disassembled all the pieces, put it back together, and reinstalled Windows 95.
Yes.
In 3rd grade, and my parents were like, "What the hell are you doing here?" I'm like,
yeah.
I was always curious about how systems and things worked, and it just had this like innate curiosity about the world, essentially. And it's like, well, someone tells me that this is the way it is, but that doesn't mean that's the way it has to be forever, right? And so,
did you, when you opened it, did you find any photos like in the hard drive? How does that work?
Just, all the cables and dust bunnies and whatever else are just like, it's pretty simple. It's very mechanical for, early PC days. It's like this ribbon cable only fits one way, but disassemble it like a Lego set, put it back together. Okay, that was cool. And it booted back up. So I did everything right. And now that I'm in here, how do I start learning how to mess with software? How do I get it all off and start over and start from scratch? And what are drivers and, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's so funny. Because I recently made a resume of all of my accomplishments, and I went as far back as I could, and I realized that my very first entrepreneurial venture outside of mowing lawns or whatever was with my buddy Tim Jordan. We created a role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons, and we used the school photocopiers to duplicate it. And then we sold it at Club Comics at the local comic book store. And we made these boxes. I don't even remember what it was called because I was texting with him and he couldn't remember what it was called either. But like I was selling fantastic stories like when I was a kid. And I was like, wow. And now I'm doing all the mascot stuff and all these things. So it's just very interesting the way some of the, you can see some of the early seeds and how they blossom decades later. You know?
Yeah, I mean, and the blossoming is basically just long, persistent iteration, many, 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 many times, right? It's like everything that you master in life. It may start small, but it's like if you do the same thing over and over and over and over again and just get like 0.01% better each time, but you do it enough times,
yeah,
eventually even the caveman looks like a genius, right? So,
dude, I mean, that's one thing that I'm very curious about you is how, I mean, you're clearly super smart and you're curious, you're successful. You've had at least 2 successful software companies that I know of, and yet you don't appear to be highly susceptible to the classic shiny object syndrome that so many internet entrepreneurs, including myself, are susceptible to, and even more so many of our students who are trying to get through that and actually have some degree of success. So how do you manage that? Do you have self-awareness around why you don't get more easily distracted?
well, I mean, I want to preface by saying I play with a lot of different technologies. Like, I buy different kinds of electric vehicles because they're sort of like a development platform as much as they are a car, right? And so like there are things that scratch that curiosity itch, but I can sort of quarantine them and section them off to like, this is my playful experiment side, but then I can also segment and look at, okay, for the thing I'm really trying to accomplish, the thing I want to be best in class for, I think is also kind of a key thing. I don't just want to do something. I want to strive to be best in class.
Yeah.
And the effort to get there is not small.
Yeah, it's enormous.
It takes a long period of patience. Yeah. So it's sort of like that is my North Star. And because of that, I feel like the work is never done. And so that focus of the work never being done keeps me focused because there's always something to improve. And even if, the other thing is like, it's not static either, right? Like this is a moving target of what best in class is. What best in class is when I started doing Campaign Refinery.
Different. Yeah, right. I remember.
I started playing with it in 2016, right? It's like toying with it. And it wasn't until 2018, it was good enough for me to use and for customers to pay us for, right? And even what it is from 2018 to 2024 is dramatically different on what the definition of best in class is.
Yeah, no, even your primary selling proposition that you launched it with, you've abandoned essentially, right? Like, so it's amazing how that stuff evolves, over time.
Yeah.
What was the initial offer about?
So originally, Campaign Refinery was designed. Well, let me go back in the origin. That what makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, that's
the origin story. Yeah. So you're messing around.
Welcome to Tellman's world.
Right.
Yeah. So I was doing all this entrepreneurial stuff, like buying off-brand soda at the grocery store and reselling it at the ferry line, like all the things. Right? I was always looking for an opportunity to make a buck, and that sort of led down the pipeline. I started my first real legitimate on-paper business in high school, which was actually started drop shipping computers on eBay, building high-end gaming PCs for friends, doing small business system integration.
Hold on, how old are you, Travis?
Right now, I'm 36.
Oh, you're the young one of the bunch. All right, we got 3.
Not just the bunch of us, but the bunch of people that we've interviewed. You've been around since we started internet marketing, as far as we know. And here you are, which is about 20 years ago, which I believe the origin story must be like. And then after high school,
I started contest domination or something, right? Like,
pretty close.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that dropshipping business actually paid for most of my college experience. I remember. So my birthday's in December, so I remember in December of my senior year, because that's when I turned 18. I could actually start a real on paper business
without sharing it with your parents.
Yeah, well, and I was like delivering pizzas, and I had two jobs. I was delivering pizzas for Roundtable, and I was working at Boys and Girls Club, and I was doing a bunch of sports. Like, I was like, I got to find a way to scale some money that's not just like me going and punching in and punching out for $10 an hour, right?
You got tired of trading time for dollars in high school.
Yeah, and I distinctly remember my mom saying, "Why don't you just deliver more pizzas at Roundtable? Like, why are you starting this business?" Which is really funny because she's actually very entrepreneurial herself, right? She has her own interesting story. But so I started this business and I've got like $100 to my name, right? Because I'm a normal broke high school kid. I'm thinking like, oh crap, like in less than a year, I'm going to school, and school's very expensive. And the expectation in my family is you're going to school and we're not paying for it. Like that
Oh,
was kind of the mandate. I'm like, well, that sounds really expensive and really hard. So how do I do that? And so between the drop shipping and everything else, I made like 40 grand in a couple of months. And I was like, shit, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
It ended up not being a sustainable business because I was doing it on eBay, and then there was like a bunch of buy it now fraud, and then a bunch of other people cut onto the drop shipping, and the margins quickly evaporated. But it opened my eyes very rapidly of like, there's a thing on the internet that you can basically just arbitrage, right? And there's always an opportunity, just like selling the Coke in the ferry line, like buying here and selling for a little bit more.
that was Coca-Cola for those of you that just filled it. Not actually the brand, soda. That means soda in the U.S. in some places in the U.S.
Travis, when you say the ferry line, what did you
Yeah.
mean by that?
Ferry, like
like a boat that takes your cars from one spot to the next.
Okay, so you'd buy the soda, and there'd be a bunch of people thirsty waiting for the ferry to show up, and there was a ferry in your town.
Yeah. So right down the hill from my house, there was a little tiny ferry that went between our main town and Guimas
Great.
Island.
So you had a captive audience. They had nothing to drink, and
I was going up and down with a cooler in my wagon.
Yeah, I love
cooler
that.
full of ice.
I love that.
And
That's
even
great.
like I remember one guy on a motorcycle. I'll never forget this because it's like talk about pricing, opening your eyes. I was buying it for like 20 cents a can, because I'm buying in bulk off brand, and I was selling it for like 75 cents, right? And I remember this guy looks at me and he goes, "You should sell it for $2." And I was like, "What?" He gave me $2 because I don't even want a soda. Like I don't want a Coke. I want you to understand that you have more pricing leverage than you are currently asking for.
Wow, what a good lesson.
Well, I didn't really get it at the time, but like
Right.
obviously it stuck with me. And years later, I'm like, okay,
Now I
price
get it.
elasticity, like all those.
I would have
things.
said at least $1 so you don't have to worry about change. I mean, that was my first thought.
Well, it was kind of the disparity, right? Because like my stepdad was the one that told me, hey, you're paying like 25 cents, you should sell it for 75 cents. You're,
Right.
Making 2x your original investment.
Right.
But he's sort of blue collar. That's the way he thinks. And then this whole other way of thinking about pricing and value, and
Right.
what is the value? It's not necessarily based on what I paid. It's based on
how
what
thirsty they are.
What is it worth to the person at the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Total price discrimination in economics is what that's called.
That's right.
Yeah. So anyway, so I do this dropshipping business. It gets me into college, and then I go do the college thing, and I like work at enterprise IT. I work my way into an enterprise IT job while at school, which charges
not the rental company Enterprise, but a large company. You're
Yeah.
saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, I worked for the school, so I
You
started
worked for
as
the school.
like help desk IT because I knew that was a skill set I had, and they quickly realized I had other skills. And by the time I graduated, I was building like a multi-million-dollar video streaming server that had like 32 servers, which was replacing coax for the whole campus.
Right.
And you could actually rewind up to 24 hours of every channel that we offered because it was like buffering. And this is in 2009. It was
Right.
buffering 60 channels of DirecTV, and anyone could go onto a browser and scrub back up to 24 hours. It was a very cool system.
I have some early video streaming experience as well, but we won't share what industry that was in for now.
So I do the school thing, and I graduate, and I do what everyone thinks you should do when you graduate. Is I go try to find a job, and I find one, and it gets me to Seattle, which I'm thankful for because I met my then girlfriend, now wife, as part of that process. But I very quickly realized as this like account manager role for a digital curriculum company that I'm not exactly optimized for the corporate environment, because when I was hired, they said, hey, your comp plan is based on, amount of business retained and business grown. And I was quickly looking at systems and curious, and I was automating myself out of a job. Essentially, I had created drip sequences for my prospects that were in Salesforce. And I was, instead of spending what they wanted of 20 minutes per customer per month, and I had like a couple hundred customers, I was spending 15 minutes per customer per renewal. Okay. And then they changed the comp plan from the revenue driven to number of minutes on the phone and activities logged in Salesforce. So even though I was outperforming my spec sheet, my like pie in the sky, best possible number, I was outperforming it by 30%. and my peers were losing business left and right because they were spending more time on the phone. They were getting paid more than I
they were
was.
trying to have people build better relationships, right? And like have deeper connection and all the things.
The way I saw it, my deal was to go close the business and grow it and make
Do a
them
job
happy.
better. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's
So anyway,
interesting.
so I quit that job to go do basically run an affiliate program for a best-selling author and speaker, which then evolved into learning how to run LinkedIn ads and media buying.
What media? What market was the author?
It was one of the people that was on The Secret.
Oh, okay, cool.
So she had like a live event funnel and a bunch of affiliates and a bunch of speaking gigs, and had published like 13 books or something at the time, and was doing a book launch. So there's obviously a lot of affiliate activity related to that. And then I picked up the media buying to start filling her events. I got up to spending about $40K a month on LinkedIn ads, which was penciling out to about $1 million in sales through her funnel because she was such a good funnel. And I had never run ads before, right? So it's like just trying to figure things out and fill her events and track it through the funnel. And that was great until she was like, move to where our headquarters are. And I was like, no, I like the Northwest. And so, we sort of, basically she fired me, and
wow. And I mean, it totally could have stayed a remote thing forever. Like if she wanted it to, crazy.
Yeah. And so I was like, I was kind of panicking because she actually fired me the day after I signed a long-term lease to move in with my now wife. And I was like, I've basically never been fired in my life.
Right. What the heck?
And I was like, this doesn't feel right. And she ended up calling me 30 days later and saying, we made a huge mistake. Can you please come back for a while? But like at that point, it's like, if you have that kind of stress relationship, it's going to break again. So I did accept it because I needed the money. But while I did that, it opened my eyes that, hey, I don't have my own asset.
Right.
I don't have my own business. I've basically been trading time for money yet again. There's, not quite the same, but kind of the same. And so I was like, okay, I need to build my own email list as fast as possible. I had been toying around with some internet marketing blogging while I was in college. I had my first little Aweber list with a couple hundred subscribers that I'd spent years trying to acquire, which a couple hundred, free opt-ins isn't going to get you anywhere in terms of revenue. So I was like, how do I rapidly build a list? And I was like, well, as I've been working for her, one of the things that had worked best for lead generation was a contest, but I didn't like any of the way that the contest apps worked at the time. So while I had re-engaged with her for a while, I said, okay, I'm going to take every penny I have and I'm going to put some money on a credit card.
What year is this?
This is the end of 2011.
Okay, cool.
And so I decided, okay, I've got this idea about how I think contests should work, and I really tried to boil it down to be as simple as possible. And I tried to go find a developer, which I hired basically a fraudster at the beginning that didn't work out, that burned a couple grand, and then I hired someone really good. But I at this point racked up like almost $8,000 in credit card debt on top of my existing student loans.
I almost asked you, like, I'm thinking of a developer. I was going to say, is his name, but I'm not.
Yes, his name is Yes. But I get this very minimal viable product as a WordPress plugin that meets my ultra minimalist spec sheet of what I think would make a contest interesting. And they billed me what I wanted, and I ran a contest, and I got 2,000 subscribers in my first weekend running it. And I was like, shit, that works.
Whoa.
Okay.
Yeah. Email subscribers, right?
Yeah, email subscribers. And I was like, great. Not only did that work, that sounds like a great case study to me. Yeah. So wrote a sales page for it. Like, I mean, the delivery on this was like, it's so bananas how stupid it was. I mean, I didn't even have a members area. It was literally just an Aweber autoresponder with an unsecured Amazon S3 link. Yeah. Right? Just like, here's your plugin, and here's a link to like a YouTube video about how to install it.
Right.
And I was like, well, I need an upsell. So I will position the licensing of this as a single site, and I'll have a multi-site license, which I have no way of enforcing. And I made a copy of the plugin, went in and changed the header to multi-site license to be the name.
Right.
Like just enough to change that. It was basically the same tech, but I'm like, this one I've blessed you with the ability to use a multi-site.
Right.
This one is a single site, so now I have an upsell.
Right.
I was like, well, I need more upsells. So let me go.
But you're 24, 25 at this time.
Barely 24. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so I say, who has good marketing stuff? And I knew a few people from the internet marketing world, but not a lot. And someone's like, hey, you should talk to this guy, Mark Thompson. He's got a bunch of internet marketing stuff.
Oh yeah, Mark Thompson.
And so I reached out to him and said, hey, I'm trying to build this funnel. I've sold at this point a couple hundred copies because I convinced one of my other friends to mail it to their list, even with just my one upsell as a ClickBank product. And he looked at it and he goes, sure, we can throw one of my, billion products in there as an upsell. But I think you've got something interesting here. Have you ever done a Warrior Forum launch?
Oh,
Right. And so that's when he decided it's just going to bolt on, and he had run those successfully quite a few times. And we did over $250,000 in a week as a Warrior Forum launch as a WordPress plugin.
Amazing.
awesome.
Which kind of blew my mind. I was like, okay, well, that's neat. But that's not scalable. And the product itself is limited. And how do I distribute updates? And thinking about, like, from a technological standpoint, how do I build this into something sustainable? And that's when I took all of the money that I had left over after paying off my credit cards and whatever else. Obviously, I didn't make $250,000. Half
Right,
goes to
right.
affiliates, half goes to
Affiliates are
Mark.
getting half of that at least.
Right. So it whittles down to not be all that much money, but it was more than enough to cover my original development costs. It was more enough to give me some padding on the student loans and everything else, and not freak out and think I have to go sell iPhones at the Apple store,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and give me just a little bit of money to develop the next version, which one of our very first customers was a developer who had actually fixed a few bugs in the product and sent it back for free because he's like, hey, it's a cool product, cool idea.
Right.
I fixed a few bugs on this random version of WordPress that you might like.
That's great.
Oh, by the way, I'm living in Virginia, but I'm moving back to Washington. Do you want to meet up for a coffee? And he wanted to, like, license the name. And I was like, no. Here's the vision for a software as a service. And he goes, that's cool. Let's partner. And so we rebuilt the whole thing from scratch as a software as a service, and then launched that as a forum offer the following year. Did another significant launch. And so all in all, I had over 20,000 customers, generated over 30 million opt-ins, and then got acquired a few years ago. So that was like the initial software.
That's
How
awesome.
many did you have at the end?
Over 20,000 paying customers that had paid us something, right?
Yeah.
Between forum launching and subscribers.
Yeah. That's great.
And
That's
then
amazing.
collected over 30 million opt-ins.
And that all started as a WSO or a Warrior
Yeah.
Plus launch. Yeah.
So
my
cool.
first software product.
Nice.
Wow.
Nice. Travis, would you be willing to unplug and plug back in your mic, because you're getting some, like, electric clicking going on, and I think we might be able to. Well, now you're muted.
Are you sure it's him?
Well, it was happening while he was talking before, consistently. Try talking now, Travis. Oh.
All right, I unplugged the XLR and plugged it back in. We good?
Oh yeah, I think we are now. I heard a little static. I think you're good now. Yeah.
Cool.
What'd you do?
Awesome.
Buy that with the money from the launch or something? Is it 12 years old? Come on.
Okay. So that's a great story. Harris, did you tell Travis that you're working with Warrior and bringing some awesome people on board and all that?
At the beginning, I mentioned it, but I haven't. I don't even know if I've mentioned to you, because I mean you're already in an established, Campaign Refinery. I said it right. Is already an established company. I wouldn't presume that you want to do a Warrior Plus launch right now, but that's what I'm doing with them. Is I'm looking. But if you do run into people that you think would be good for it, I mean, I'm sure you have a good relationship with Mike if he's forwarding me to your message, your video. But if you do, let me know and I can talk to him if you run across people, because there's a big push right now there.
I mean, the great part about those kinds of communities is that they're a really good validating launchpad for ideas, right? And so you need to think about, okay, how do I get something that's compelling? Does the market care about the idea at all? But you need to also understand, like, what's gonna be the follow-up act, right? Because that in and of itself is not sustainable, but it's far better deal than, say, running an AppSumo, which Contest Domination was on an AppSumo deal at one point. And those terms are egregious, but it is a good way to get people in and validate if you don't have the know-how of the Warrior forums or
I'm reaching out to Udemy. Udemy, I don't know how to pronounce it. Udemy instructors, and they're a very hungry crowd, because I think their deal is not very good either. Like they're like 70% if it's sold within the marketplace, which is egregious as well, I think. But
That's
anyway, let's move on.
Same terms as AppSumo. They keep 70.
They keep 70 as well. Yeah.
Yeah, which is wild.
Yeah, I mean, even 30 with the App Store sounds high to us.
The federal government agrees.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's move on. So when you first started, how did you so you sold that? You're like, gee, what should I do next? Maybe I'll start an email service provider.
So Contest Domination just sold a little over 2 years ago,
Oh, okay.
whereas Champion Refinery, I started playing with the idea in 2016. And the reason I started playing with it was I had done the arc of my own email list that most marketers have done, especially the OGs, is they probably started on an Aweber list or something similar, and then they migrated to Infusionsoft, now Keep, and they try to push things further and get more complicated automations and all that kind of stuff. And that part was great, except for the fact that their deliverability was utter dog shit. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It was bad. And to make matters worse, not only was it bad, but I didn't know why it was bad. I didn't know how to make it better, and they didn't either. Is the key part of that.
Yeah.
And were they using their own? It was their domain that they were mailing from, kind of like Aweber, or
everybody was doing something different.
Yeah,
Right? I mean,
there's not a one answer to fit all about how Infusionsoft was doing it at that point. But basically, I just got super frustrated with things not working right, but specifically with deliverability. And I had this gnawing thought in the back of my head that, okay, I know it should be better, but I don't know how much better. I don't know how to get it there. I don't know what the blueprint looks like. And so I thought, if I'm having this feeling and I built a platform that helps a lot of people build their email list, I wonder what everyone else thinks about their email list providers. So I surveyed my audience about deliverability specifically. And I said, basically, how valuable is email to you? How much does it move the needle? How good is your deliverability? And do you feel your deliverability is, better than you expected, what you expect, or worse than expected? And then basically, how happy are you with your current email platform? And what I took away from that at the conclusion was everyone thought their deliverability should be better. No one knew what their deliverability should actually be. And no one liked their email service provider, yet everyone said it's the most profitable thing they do. So I was like, okay, well, I am not alone. In fact, that is what most people think. And so, after some back and forth in Infusionsoft, and they basically said, good luck finding anything better. I said, I'm a software guy, wrong answer. I'm going to go figure it out. It's going to be
painful. Like, okay.
Yeah. I'm going to go figure it out. It's going to be painful. It's going to be costly. It's going to take a long time, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure it out. And then I'm coming for your customers. That's what's going to happen. And I knew it would be hard. I knew it would be expensive, but I was off by a factor of 10. And that's being charitable.
Yeah.
And so I spent a solid 7 figures of my own money and multiple years of my life tooling with this idea and trying to figure it out and going down the path of discovery, that curiosity, tearing things apart, testing things, evolving, iterating, until I come up with a sort of, a hypothesis, test them, iterate, so on and so forth, and actually understand, like, what are the levers that actually move.
Did that original survey tell you, like, did people report kind of what they were getting, open rates and deliverability, and which platform they were on? Like, could you like, was that part of your discovery though? Was like,
no.
Oh, get response is here and Aweber is here, and no, okay,
no, because honestly, I didn't trust people to know their numbers. I didn't want to add that friction to it.
Yeah.
And also, every platform reports them differently. So I was like, what I want to capture here is sentiment. Am I underperforming? Underperforming? Is it making lots of money? Do I love it? Do I hate it? And if I could capture market sentiment, that would help me validate, is my feeling correct? Because people, unfortunately, don't buy on data unless they're very odd. They buy on emotion. And so I wanted to know, emotionally, do they feel like they're underperforming? Do they make lots of money? Do they hate their product? Do they love the product? I would ask them what they're using and then what their affinity was. Universally, people don't like the tool they're using. Like that was the overarching takeaway, is that no matter who you're using, I don't care if it's GetResponse, Aweber, Infusionsoft, and I'm sure now Campaign Refinery, every single platform that was on there, user satisfaction was fairly low because I believe of the disconnect between what they felt they were getting versus what they felt they should be getting.
Yeah.
On performance, even though it was the most profitable channel they had, they felt like it should be performing far superior to where it actually was.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in email since before the beginning, before before you were selling Coca-Cola and or not Coke, but soda in the line, and we, back then we had our own system, but then I have a Traffic for Me, which is a email solo ad company, so I know what people are mailing on. And there's really not a discernible difference between most platforms anyway, and certainly not how much people like them, or I never hear people say, "Oh yeah, I love Constant Contact," or whatever. So
It's usually begrudgingly we use XYZ.
yeah,
That's
people like
very
Klaviyo right now, but I don't, but they don't have a deliverability question in front of them either in Klaviyo. So
well. Pretty much all of people's lists on Klaviyo is all buyers. If we all worked with only buyers list, it makes the job 80% easier.
right, right.
Like that is not that's a not for nothing data
Right,
point.
right. Wow. A buyer's list does better. Incredible.
Yeah, even a blind man could trip over profitability on a list like that.
Well,
Yeah,
on that note, maybe we should get into some real world questions.
Well, wait, I still want to know real quick. I still want to know real quick. How did it? What was it? What was it started as? Like, what was the positioning of Campaign Refinery started as? Which I guess
Shifted.
you're about to get to, and then what is it now, and how is that different?
Sure. So my original sort of MVP, because that's always like how do I strip it down, was basically that Campaign Refinery was an interface to let you manage your contacts, create automations, but that the sending could go through one of multiple SMTP providers. So Mailgun, SendGrid, Amazon SES, Elastic Email, right? A whole bunch of these different services. And we even had a feature which I thought was really cool, but almost nobody used, which was actually even split testing SMTP services. So you could say, I want to send a broadcast. I want to split test 10% of my list across these different services. I want to wait 1 hour, and whichever one of them overperforms, pick that as the winner and send it to all the remaining leads from my broadcast to that service. Basically, no one used that. And what we found pretty rapidly was a couple things. One was we were basically getting some abuse from customers that were running crazy amounts of volume through that. And so we were getting hammered doing all the hard work and basically making none of the money. Just straight up from business fundamentals, that was whack. But more importantly, from positioning and performance, it required just a little bit too much technical expertise by the customers, because you had to go create your Mailgun or SendGrid account. Then you had to connect it properly with the webhook so that the analytics showed up, which required, obviously the DNS stuff, the webhook stuff, and they often tripped over things and got stuck. And if they needed our help to do it, you have 2-factor logins on all these services. And it was a nightmare to support. It was hard for them to set up. And then even once they got there, we didn't have enough control to really dictate their outcomes, right? Because we didn't control the IPs. It was whatever IP they signed up with, or if they did dedicated IP, were they implementing proper strategies with it? Usually by the time they were coming to us, they still didn't know enough about deliverability or email to make the most out of the tool set we had given them.
Right.
So in 2020, we essentially pivoted, where I said, okay, we're not going to integrate any of these SMTP providers anymore. We're going to build on a big, heavy-duty enterprise version of Mailgun that we control, with a bunch of IPs that we control, that we can provision in different pools, that we can do what we need to do, that we can warm up properly, that we can decide who goes where and who does what, and look at their metrics. And
Why Mailgun?
Just at the time, it was pricing and feature set, but we've stuck with them because they've been good technology partners for us long term. We could have done something just as easily with a SendGrid or whatever else. It's not
interesting because High Level uses Mailgun as well, so
it's not the same though. But
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so but the being enterprise is one thing, but then it's us knowing how to use that enterprise asset at our disposal, and how we decide to provision and manage our IPs, and how we decide to let on certain people, not let on other people, and then how we layer that on with our other features, which is things like automatic list cleaning, right? So we know that there's really good data integrity. If every single sender on our platform has really, really, really clean data, and as a result, even though we're, according to Mailgun, one of their top 100 aggregate senders, our bounce rate is damn near zero. Like it's like 0.03%, which is not the case of other high volume senders at all, because we have so much focus on data integrity. And then because of how we nudge our customers to segment, and because of the data integrity and the risk management and all these other features and functions and sort of philosophies that we've imparted on our customers, their net result is a much, much higher open rate, which also means everyone that you're sharing our infrastructure with is an extreme performer. So you think about a rising tide floats all boats. By being really scrupulous about who we let on and who we don't, all of your neighbors, it's like buying the best house in the best neighborhood as opposed to buying an awesome condo in the ghetto. It's
Yeah.
there's property value associated with that, right? So by being a more trusted platform, by having more trusted senders, and by really curating and managing our IPs really tightly, we can deliver an exceptional experience because we control enough of the stack to make sure that those outcomes actually
You
come to
kind of
fruition.
you force best practices, some of them, most of the best practices onto them. So like, making sure that they're clean coming in, making sure that, I mean, there's an ability to to when people opt in also to make sure that they're clean, I think.
It does it automatically no matter how the lead gets into the system. So
Okay.
if they're subscribing via form, API, CSV upload, manual add, whatever, there's a real-time clean. And if it passes the cleaner and they remain subscribed, it has an automatic, or the default behavior is every 90 days, it will check that email again. So every system,
Why? Why does it need to check it every? You know it was a good email. Why do you have to check it every 90 days?
well, people abandon email addresses, people die, people become complainers because they, had a bad divorce and now they complain about every single email or whatever happened in their life, right? Like things happen and the behavior and validity of an email changes over time. It is not a static thing.
They get radicalized.
Seriously.
They get anti-email radical.
That is a thing, right? Like
No, I know.
a risk profile of someone today. I mean, it's the same reason that your credit score changes over time, right? Like your behavior changes and the way you interact with things change, and you need to be adapting to that in real time, fluidly, as a business, and reassessing your risk because you want to minimize complaints, you want to minimize bounces, you want to minimize spam traps, right? All these negative things. And like if you haven't emailed in a while, which is not best practice, but if you haven't emailed in a while, you might have bad email addresses that have gone bad, and you hit mail and the first thing they do is bounce, and now you have a high bounce rate, and that dings your reputation. And so
wait, go back to it's bad if you haven't emailed in a while. So if I'm mailing every day and then I take off for 3 weeks and then I come back to it, my deliverability is going to go down?
temporarily, the longer you wait, the more volatile the response.
All right, so now let's get into some fun. So like, obviously the email marketing game has changed a lot in the last few years.
And even a lot since February.
And even more recently. And Travis, you've been giving me a lot of advice about how to I mean, I've been a campaign refinery customer for a long time, and you've been giving me a lot of advice that I have not fully taken. And I'll be the first to admit, like I've been very slow to adapt to the new laws of email. And like I'm kind of irritated at like how long it's taking me to get up to speed. But I'm curious about your view of, at this point, like where things are today, and what you see from your perspective on how new or existing email marketers or email driven businesses should be thinking about building a list, growing a list, and maintaining a list in terms of their setup. We primarily are talking to email marketers on the Tellman and Fellman show, and lots of people who've been around for a long time have been facing pretty similar challenges and problems, and everyone has their own little philosophy on how to handle it. And so what's yours? Like how try without getting too technical yet, we'll get into the more technical, but like overall, I'm a new email marketer. I'm building an email list for the first time. Should I be broadcasting every day?
I got a course. I got a course from Tellman and Fellman, and it's teaching me how to do this multi-person crazy list building thing. And I'm going to have 100 people a day, 1,000 people in 3 weeks. Blah blah. What's some of the best practices?
Well, so let's assume that you've done all of the authentication technical foundation.
Yeah, the SPF, the DKIM, you can't not do that anymore.
You followed the directions with the autoresponder service that you're using, email service that you're using.
You're not using a Gmail account because that's not possible anymore.
Right. Well, and hopefully the email service provider you're using is giving you proper authentication stuff, because there are some technical aspects. For instance, like, I'm not here to like dog on specific people too much, but you mentioned Go High Level, which I know is hot, and they've got really, really good CRM features, but the way that they're executing on their email plan leaves a lot to be desired. And And if you followed their basic instructions, you would be setting yourself up to be handicapped on your performance.
I'm not surprised. It's very much like let's build a rickety space shuttle and see if people survive. Is kind of, but you know, it's got a lot of bells and whistles, and yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that.
They offer a very compelling CRM product. I want to be clear. I have a lot of respect for what they've done in that regard. I'm being very specific about their email implementation execution.
Yeah,
is not.
Well, you're an email specialist. They're not an email specialist. I mean, to be fair, right?
And it shows. That's all I'm saying. So let's just say that the technical foundation is there, and you're thinking like, okay, broad strokes. What are the sort of key pillars I need to think of as an email marketer, late 2024 going into 2025? You know, first is make sure you're collecting good data, right? So that's where are they coming from? Are they actually interested in what I have to do, have to sell, have to talk about? Are they going to care about what I'm trying to do as a business, right? Because a lot of people get hung up on the vanity number, and they're like, I need to get as many email addresses in there as possible. But it's like, if they're not the right people, then what the hell are we doing here? You know, like what's the point? We talked about, you know, Klaviyo having decent success. Well, it's like, well, everyone who walks in is a buyer of your thing. Like, of course, you by default already have a list of people that are highly qualified.
There's a cart abandonment sequence. Come on,
5% of your list. Cool, cool story. You know, but even then, they're on a page about your product. It's very, very specific, right? It's very different. You know, think about the contest version of me in the past, right? People used to say, "Oh, I want to give away an iTunes gift card, an Amazon gift card." I'm like, cool. How does that relate to writing about mascots? How does that relate to doing email drops, right?
Or whatever.
They're not correlated to what you're doing. And so you get a bunch of subscribers, sure. But if they don't care about what you do, they're not going to be engaged. They're going to complain. They're going to be nothing but a pain in your ass, and they're going to inflate your email service provider bill because they're taking up dead space, right? They're taking up inventory, subscriber counts, volume, whatever, right? They are chewing up assets that could be used towards people that actually matter. So data quality is number one. With that, the second component is, are they valid? Are they complainers? Sort of a risk assessment piece of it. And then secondarily, okay, frickin' send your email more. Like that is the number one mistake I see people doing, is they are not emailing enough.
That's an amazing find, really. I mean, you know, I think especially people starting out, they're scared to bother their list too often, and you're not just dealing with internet marketing and digital marketing. You're dealing with like a gamut where, you know, usually they're like, oh, well, I'm in this market, so I should only mail once a month.
Yeah, no, basically you should probably be emailing at least once a week. And if your audience can handle it, if your copywriting is compelling, right, you have to have something compelling to say. If you have something interesting to say that is actually useful, a couple times a week, daily, like you have to think about, there's two sort of things at odds here. One is you might think like, oh, I don't want to bother them, right? But the second component is you're not only needing to keep the relationship hot, which is the obvious marketing angle, but from a technical perspective, you actually need to keep Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, etc., happy and predictable about what performance to expect from you. So if you're going longer periods of time between sending, what happens is they have sort of like a memory decay. And if they forget about your last performance because it was too long ago, they're going to be far more cautious about what to do with your email today because they think that the behavior of their subscribers changes, right? And so when you wait too long, they will be more cautious and reserved about placement and how much they expose your email. Whereas if you email, let's say daily, and you get very similar performance every day, they have complete confidence about how it's gonna respond, right? They say, hey, this person always sends to, whether it's 500 people, 5,000, 50,000, 500,000, 5 million people. The point is you do it consistently and you get the same performance consistently. And so their risk assessment of you as a sender goes down. And so they're much more likely to let the email through faster, to put better placement on it, and basically reward you in terms of sender reputation because they can predict accurately what to expect from your list behavior-wise. And that only happens when you send consistently.
That seems to be true of like that same basic algorithm seems to be true of most social platforms too, right? Basically, consistency wins in the long haul.
Yeah, well, you think about, what are they optimizing for? They're optimizing for on-page time for themselves, for their users to come back repeatedly. but they're also optimizing for overall user experience. So if your content has a certain engagement rate, certain open, certain click rate, certain, an email measurable complaint rate, then they can predict
Right.
how wanted or not wanted that content is, and they will reward you for it accordingly.
Right.
Or punish you accordingly.
So,
Right.
so let's talk about pruning, list hygiene, list warm up, all these types of things. So, like in the past, build a big list, mail it all the time, make a bunch of money, everybody's happy. Today,
This is the thing that Tellman's saying he's been a little slow to adopt, because
Yeah.
he's been doing that since for
Dawn
a
of
while,
time,
and it's
right?
been working. It's been working probably pretty well up until this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been a drop off, right? And so, like, my question for you, and we've talked about this, so I kind of know your answer already, Travis, but who knows? Maybe things have changed. Is rather than just building basically there's deliverability drag, right? Like if you have a big list and you have a small percentage of people that are opening your emails, then Gmail and the powers that be are going to dampen the number of people that are going to see your emails in the first place, and then people just stop getting them even though they want to.
So what does dampen mean? Like it doesn't even reach them. They don't. It doesn't even go to a spam, or maybe it goes to a spam filter or folder. But isn't it like, I guess, is that the worst case scenario, that it's going to land in a spam folder, or does it just not even get delivered?
Worst case scenario is you get a full out block. The most likely scenario that Tellman's outlining is a greater and greater percentage of your email starts going to spam as opposed to the inbox or even the promotions tab for Gmail. And I can speak to that a bit. So basically, they're obsessed with relevancy, right? And to them, relevancy is ratios of engagement. And so what happens if you have a bunch of people that are not opening and clicking your emails, even if they opted in, even if they bought something from you, but they just stop engaging. If that happens enough times over a long enough period, Google specifically, I mean, they all do this to a certain extent, but Google more so than others, which is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, they will basically treat that the same as if it was cold email, because they see a signal of lack of engagement as unwanted mail.
Right.
Wow.
It may not legally, by the definition, be unsolicited mail, but they start treating it as such. And so you start getting penalized as if you're sending a bunch of unsolicited mail because you're trying to talk to someone who doesn't want to hear from you. That's all they care about. And so when you have that, it negatively drags your sender reputation, your domain reputation, which you can track in Google Postmaster tools. And when that happens, then the mail of the people that are excited and do open and click, their mail starts getting redirected to folders you don't want, right? And that's where you start this negative downward spiral, and you have significant and rapid atrophy of your overall list and engagement because you've been trying to drag the dead weight. Whereas if you are tight about segmentation and you treat it more like a dating list than messaging everyone who's ever been an ex of yours,
right?
if you come to it with that philosophy and narrow your segmentation to people who've opened within a certain amount of time, a good default starter is last 30-day openers. If you're mailing regularly, you can expand or contract from there. That will suddenly boost your ratios and keep your hot list hot. And so Google looks at that and says, dang, they went from a 15% open rate to a 40% open rate. That's great. And then your reputation goes up, and that 40% becomes 55, becomes 60. And all of a sudden you're humming with a high domain reputation. And you could literally send a message to that list that says free crypto money, and it would inbox because you've built up a relationship. You've shown that you have a high engagement rate, and your trust factor goes way, 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 way up with the internet service providers to allow your email to have really high quality inbox placement.
So do you need to kind of blend, like if you're trying to recover a list, let's say you have, I'm going to just use, you have a list of 100,000 and you've been getting like a below 10% open rate, and you're like, well, this is dumb. Let me just mail to the most engaged people. I'm going to mail to the people that have opened in the last, 30 days. And now it gets a 35% open rate. But it's only 8,000 people, and you mail it, and surprise, surprise, you get about the same number of clicks as however that works. You do that a few times to the hot list, as you called it, and then are you now able to mail? Is it advised, or are you now able to go back and start mailing that whole old 100,000, or should you just kind of eke it in like equal number of like maybe maybe open it up to, instead of, oh, I know, actually, you're smiling because I do know the answer, actually. I'll let you answer. Go. I just realized, like, I do know what the right way to do it is, because I think I heard you teach it before. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So if you're trying to, recover a list who's had some trauma, let's say, you are right. The very first step is cut it back to recent engagers, get that engagement up. For example, as far as benchmarks, for us to consider an account healthy, it must be averaging at least a 30% open rate as the floor. You won't get kicked off if you're below that, but there be dragons if you're below that number is sort of the philosophy that we take, which is even that floor is double what the floor is on other ESPs, because we want to encourage people to really be successful. So when you have this big chunk of your list now that is the old data, the historical data, you have to think of everything in terms of ratios. So if you're in recovery mode, you want the bulk of your email traffic to be the hot list, the warm, engaged, recently active users. And then you can feather in a portion of the remaining list. And the way that we like to do that is we like to write a 5 email sequence that's super engaging. Its only purpose in life of those emails is to get someone to do something, right? To open, to click, to reply, to show some engagement. And what we would do is we would take that remaining list. So let's say, you had a 100,000 person list and you're now only mailing 10,000 as a broadcast. That 10,000 should be 80% of your volume, which means you can only do 20% of volume per day of non-engaged. So you can only take whatever your engagement is, 20% of that is the number that you would batch in each day to your sequence.
Yeah, I didn't remember. I don't think I heard you say that on a previous interview. The 20. So just feather in 20%, and then that's got to stay above 30. That's got to stay above 30% open rate, and then you can feather in some more and feather in some more. But really, people, some of those original 10 are going to fall off the end of it.
Well,
so it's really just opening up the window. So if you're if you get them re-engaged, and you've got like they're opening from 30 days, then how do you even, right? So now I'm going to go to 40 days or something like that.
Well, so if you're in recovery mode, 30% is the floor, remember? So you actually, if you're trying to really knock this out of the park, you want to be 45, 50, 55% open rate.
Yeah.
So you might need to tighten your segment even tighter until you have that, so that it can sustain what you're doing next, which is, batching in a couple hundred people a day at first into your sequence. And as people go through the sequence, a couple hundred people a day, some of those are going to open and click. And then when they do, they become eligible for your broadcast.
Right.
So you're actually feeding your broadcast segment off of this small drip from your old leads going through your hyper engaging sequence until you.
Is this something that you're able to do? So basically, now I've got this got to stay on camera. This non-engaged list of whatever we said pretended to have 90,000, and now you're able to say, okay, here's the 5-part campaign, and I want you to send 150 a day.
You're asking, is that like an automated thing, or is that just a procedural thing?
Is that an automated thing? Yeah.
It's not automated right now, primarily because we want people actually looking at their metrics to see if it goes to total shit. But it takes 15 seconds a day. You're basically just going in and saying, I'm going to show 150 people in this segment. I'm going to apply a trigger tag to that 150 people, and I'm done for the day.
Got it.
And by doing that, you think, okay, well, that sounds annoying. Like it's going to take forever. How much would it cost for you to go acquire 150 new people from Facebook ads every day?
Yeah.
Right.
It's costs you essentially nothing to do it. This re-engagement strategy.
Right. You get a VA to do it for $100 a week, and you're done.
Right.
And among other tasks.
Yeah. So it's really the smart way to do it, but you gotta keep the ratios low, because like I said, you need the vast majority of the email that's coming from your domain to be highly engaged, so that you can prop up your sender domain reputation, so it can sustain the re-engagement. And if I were to cut it down, I wouldn't just say, okay, tomorrow, let's say I've had my 10% open rates for 5 years, and then tomorrow I'm going to go dial out the 30-day openers and immediately start the re-engagement. I would not do that. I would cut it back to the recently engaged and get that engagement level up, and until I sustain that, and then I go in Google Postmaster Tools after a week or two and see, is my domain reputation coming up? Because until it comes up, you do not have the credit to spend like from reputation standpoint
Right.
on re-engaging, and you're not going to get the most out of it.
Right.
Because you don't have the reputation to get that other stuff to actually inbox again at a small volume even. So you have to basically prop that back up and do reputation repair before you can then start doing the re-engagement component.
Okay. And then how about now that's dealing with someone who's got a list already to re-engage. Let's go back to the brand new guy or gal.
Check this part out, right? So like maybe it's the brand new person or somebody that's in business that's going already and going in and they have new leads coming in, or maybe it's someone who's re-engaged their list and the people who have engaged are then now able to be mailed. Like, what are your feelings on sequences for your people who've recently clicked and or are proven clickers, and like your philosophy on broadcasting versus drip sequences, like, how long should they be inactive before they get pruned, all this kind of stuff.
Well, if a new lead does, a lot of our customers, if a new lead doesn't open or click within 3 days, they're gone.
3 days. Wow. Okay. That's the tightest turnaround that I've.
Did you see that? Did you see Tellman's heart go? Whoa!
Yeah, no, that wasn't that. The shortest amount of time that I've heard, I think, is 15 so far.
15. We've heard quite a few people saying 15. Yeah.
If you knock on
15, we've heard 15 and 30. Somehow Tellman's hearing 60, but I've mostly heard 15 and 30. But 3 days, that's.
If you move into a brand new neighborhood and you knock on your neighbor's door 3 days in a row and they don't answer, what do you think you should do?
Wait a week and try again?
You should stop knocking on the door.
Put a pile of dog poo in a bag and set it on fire?
Yeah, they clearly don't want to answer the door. Yeah,
that's fine. But why let them? It's like letting a fox into the hen house. Why would you let negative data come drag you down, and just because you paid to acquire it? Okay,
that's a total perspective shift for a lot of us, though. Yeah. Like you're basically you're saying like that, like you're trying to acquire good people, not just people, not just maybes, we're marketers. We can convert them,
I think the real question that most people have to ask is my desire to hang on to this lead driven out of an actual business need, or is it out of my vanity of wanting to see a bigger subscriber count? And that's a really hard thing for a lot of marketers to let the ego go and realize that it's not about the total size of your list or whatever. It's about the performance of your list, right? Like I distinctly remember back in 2014.
I try to tell my wife this all the time, and
it's not about the size; it's about the performance.
Yeah, I'm talking about email, guys. Relax. She does email design for a retail store using Klaviyo. Jesus.
I mean, I distinctly remember back in 2014, for example, years before I even started Campaign Refinery, and I was one of the top 10 affiliates for one of Brian Moran's launches. He was just kind of getting Samcart going, and Andre Chaperone cleaned the floor with all of us, and he had by far the smallest list. Right? He had sent in, I think, hundreds of leads. I had sent in like 10,000 leads, and other people had sent in way more than even me.
Right.
Yet he destroyed all of us in sales from his like 2,500 person list he was promoting it to, because they were tight, narrow, high quality, relationship driven, right? So it's like, do you want, or as Perry Belcher always says, do you want to be right or do you want to be rich? He's not, he didn't invent that, but he parrots it a lot. So there's definitely some truth to that. And so we have to think about, why are we hanging on to this lead? Are they actually serving us? Because if they're not into what you have to say, maybe they change their mind, maybe they're not that serious. Like, you want the Glengarry leads, right? You want the good leads.
Okay, well, so all right, so let's say they've clicked in 3 days. Okay, great. How much inactivity do you recommend, just based on all the people that you've worked with? Obviously, you want all your clients to make money, and you want them to have as many engaged leads as possible to continue to buy all their stuff. But if someone hasn't engaged for X number of days, when should they be knocked off? When should you stop mailing them, whether it's an autoresponder sequence or whether it's broadcasts? Like, when's the cutoff date?
Well, with the caveat that you're actually sending them content on a regular basis, which we covered in the beginning, most people are not, but you should be.
Okay.
If you're sending them content on a regular basis, a good starting baseline is 30 days.
Yeah. Yep.
Let me go back to one thing real quick. So like that 3-day window, I think it was you that shared this, and if it wasn't, you're gonna love it. But I'm pretty sure it was you. So a lot of people, we've got an ethical bribe, right? And this was you, yeah. So you've got an ethical bribe, and then you say, hey, there's an email. The next message is like, hey, go check your email inbox. But before you do that, here's a or some people put the actual download on the thank you page. I usually say they opt in. We've sent you the ethical bribe. We don't use these terms. We sent you the thing. Go download it. But before we do that, we have a one-time offer for you. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And what percentage of people open that is a lot lower, is shockingly low. That they don't even open that email that they signed up for to begin with. Like less than, I mean,
I can give you
less
the
than
numbers.
30%, right? So what have you seen, and what has been your solution for that? And tell me if you haven't heard this.
Oh, I have heard it, but go
Okay.
on anyway. It's a good one.
Audience, if you haven't heard this.
Yeah. So most people, what they do is the simplistic version of what you described, which is, hey, I've got a lead magnet. Someone puts their information in, and on the thank you page, it says, great, I've sent you the thing you've requested. Go to your inbox to get it, right? But from the marketing perspective, the problem is most people think, check, that's done. I can go back to that whenever I want to. But the reality is that's not what actually happens. And even if they do, they don't consume it. So an average lead magnet structured that way has about a 50% open rate, but it has a between 2 and 5% click rate.
Right.
So that means between 1 and like 2.5% of every email you send to someone who just told you they want that thing are ever actually going to view, consume, or even potentially get value out of that thing.
Because they're like, I have it and I can just search for it in my email later when I'm going to actually get it.
Later never comes.
It's the difference between opting in for a video series and asking for a replay of a webinar and showing up live, right? We all know that the conversion rate, the engagement level, the attention of a live webinar smokes that of, hey, I have access now to a video. I can watch it whenever I want. They're never going to do it. So conversely, what we did is, hello, scarcity is such a huge thing. And so one of the features that we have in Campaign Refinery is deadline funnel type functionality. And so we can actually retroactively remove access to offers. And so what we do is when someone opts in, first of all, we on the landing page for the opt-in offer, we like to price anchor the value, which is not uncommon, right? We say, hey, this is, worth $97 or whatever. And we try to say why it's valuable, testimonials, the whole deal, right? Like this free training is more valuable than other stuff I paid for around this topic thing, whatever. And then on the thank you page,
he's going potty. I have to go too. I can feel it.
On the thank you page, we say, great, it's free, but there's a catch. You have to go open and click the email in the next 10 minutes, or we're going to retroactively remove access to your download.
Yeah, that's so brilliant. And then what different result did they get? So before you said the open rate was 50% and you get like a 2 to 5% click through.
Yeah, so the baseline is 1 to 2.5% of every email you send gets clicked.
Right.
Right. Compared to our stats, which is a 75% open rate and a 75% click rate, which means over 60% of every email we send is getting clicked.
I can't do that math. Thank you.
It's over 60% inside of 10 minutes.
So going from low single digit, up to 60%.
Yep. Inside of 10 minutes.
And now like based on, I guess, like, who cares, right? But now your open rate and your click-through rate is valuable. So now you've got 60% or whatever, 30%. You got 3,000 times more engagement on that first email.
Well, so the benefits here are a couple different things stacked together. So the first thing is it resets the clock in their mind as soon as they hit that thank you page that their work is done, right? Because I told you from a marketing, like sort of psychology standpoint, when someone's opting into a lead magnet they can come back to whenever they feel like it, they see that as done. And as soon as they hit the thank you page and we've reset that and say, actually, your work is not done because you have to go do this extra step or I'm going to revoke it, it creates a new information gap, a new to-do gap.
Yeah.
So all those shiny tabs that they have on Chrome are not going to lure them away. And instead, they're going to go find their inbox specifically. And this is where the training of the ISP comes in, because what happens is they go to their inbox. It probably has a couple hundred unread emails. Google's going to see that they have a couple hundred unread emails, and they will also see that out of the multiple hundred options they had to click on in the inbox, they chose your email, of which they opened and they immediately clicked, which shows hyper relevancy to the user, So what do you think that's going to do for the next email you send?
It's definitely getting delivered.
Way higher probability of being delivered to the primary inbox,
I
right?
like you didn't take my definitely bait. It's way higher probability bait. Yeah.
Well, that's just the reality. Like
Yeah.
nothing's ever 100%, but it's a hell of a lot stronger signal than someone who has something in their inbox that they might search for 9 months
Yeah.
from now, maybe if you're lucky.
It's
Right.
interesting, it makes me wonder. So I've been really, and I'm kind of only mentioning this. There's a crossover because you've worked with Alex Hormozy. I've been really studying school lately, and you know, they do a really good job. I mean, some of the communities do a really good job of getting people to take the content and they reward them, and they only give it to them if they're engaging. But I get emails that I don't read. So like I get emails from school. Why do I need to read it? I'm already over in the group. So I wonder what kind of effect that has, or does Gmail does Google and Yahoo kind of know that this is a yeah? I mean, do does Gmail not deliver Facebook Messenger, not Messenger, but Facebook notifications? Because who's opening those?
Well, people do open those, but the other thing is you have to understand that you have the algorithm rules and then you have the special rules.
Yeah.
Just how
Okay.
you saw with Google search, for example, there is the algorithm way that they decide what content is shown, and then they will go out of their way to pick some favorites, right? Like, for instance, they have chosen that Reddit answers they think have a higher relevancy than maybe the
Hmm.
algorithm would give them. And so
Hmm.
you'll notice that Reddit results in Google search are sort of artificially propped up. And so
Uh
they're
huh.
going to do that for big brands that someone on the team can recognize and bless as an
Yeah.
important brand.
I'm
But
gonna
that's,
check. I bet school's not going to my spam though. They're probably in the special group, huh?
well, they're also probably transactional. And I bet even if they're not getting read as much, they probably almost never get complaints.
Right.
And so
Right.
that is another key component, right?
And
For
and
long-term viability.
complaints have become a larger multiplier than they used to be as well, right?
Yep.
They've always been
No?
a really strong multiplier. They just now have a hard cutoff.
Mhm.
Okay. Oh,
Now,
okay.
now it can totally banish you to the corner as opposed to just punishing you temporarily.
Got it. Oh,
Um,
okay.
that's the key difference on the
So if
complaint.
you get enough spam, but these are real spam complaints, not the click the button to complain to get response or whatever. Like you must have something like that to trap some of the spam complaints so that they don't become real spam complaints.
Well, we don't try to trap or artificially game anything on the
I don't
complaint.
mean that. I didn't mean it that way. I just mean that you're getting the spam complaint, but Gmail's not.
If people are unsubscribing, they can let us know if it's unsolicited mail, and we can use that. Only we have access to the results of that survey, so we can make judgment calls based on senders without them really having insight into what we're seeing because we care about real user data.
Right.
Um,
Right. Sorry,
so
I didn't mean to make it sound like there was anything shady going on.
yeah, no. So
I'm
anyway,
sure there's not.
this hyper engaged funnel on the front end really does wonders for driving that initial engagement. Because if you're thinking about, okay, if you're cutting your lead within a few days of adding them if they don't engage, and you're only getting you know half at best to open the first email, and usually you see a decay as the sequence goes on, you're really losing a lot of your leads. Whereas if we can drive that number up significantly and we get them to click and sort of start training them to click through to our offers, click through to our content, click through to booking a call, whatever it may be, we're trying to reward the behavior that we want them to do, not only because it helps us from a deliverability standpoint, but also because it helps us from the straight up marketing, conversion, and psychology standpoint.
So, how do people become clients of Campaign Refinery and learn some of the stuff that you're sharing here? I mean, there's a lot to
Learn and
take in,
implement.
and in terms of taking like the broad sweeping concepts that we've discussed in the last hour or so and putting them to work, there's a little bit more like logical linear planning involved. So like what's the process look like for a client or customer that wants to start working with you and do this right?
Sure. So the first thing worth noting is that nobody sends on Campaign Refinery now without talking to me first. So we actually require applications for every person who wants to be a sender on the platform, which helps us really, vet and maintain the quality of your neighbors on the platform, because we take that responsibility very seriously about who you're sharing the platform with and how they're going to behave. And we can cut out 95% of the bullshit before they ever even sign up if we just talk to them first and take a look at what they're doing. And then once they do, we have a number of free training resources about things like this lead magnet, flow that we talked about. We call it the lead magnet multiplier because it, multiplies your engagement. And then we're actively working on a whole lot more content related to the strategies and philosophies about email itself. We do have, of course, higher paid for, like if you want our team to actually help you execute on it. But I mean, I have an entire content team with full-time editorial staff, and we're cranking out a lot of content around these concepts and philosophies and strategies. I mean, in the past 12 months, we've published something in the order of 440 unique pieces of content.
Oh, I had no idea that you were cranking out so much content.
Yeah, cool. They're on average 2,500 to 3,000 words, well-researched, in-depth pieces of content about kind of whatever you want to know about understanding the Google changes with Google, whether you need to understand segmentation versus personalization, or all these different strategies. We're really putting a concerted effort into being sort of a content powerhouse around email. So like I said, last year, well over 400, I think it was around 440 or so pieces of content. We started cranking out YouTube videos around this as well. So we're really trying to arm our users with the information they need to be successful. And we've also got some additional premium content as well. What I think is going to be most interesting for a lot of people is, as you can imagine, we're pretty picky about who we let send on our platform, but there are a lot of users that could benefit from a significant component, significant portions of our components, whether they are allowed to send on our platform or not. So very soon, we're actually about to roll out what we call the toolbox, which is going to take a lot of our most compelling features that we can possibly modularize and allow you to layer that onto any ESP.
Oh, cool.
So if you're looking to, implement cleaning strategies that are actually a high quality cleaner with great pricing and terrific, A+ tier performance, if you're looking to monitor your reputation with Google and get automated alerts about when your domain reputation changes or your complaint rates spike or there's authentication errors, right? If you want to know about really high quality DMARC reporting and what the hell to do with it when you look at your DMARC report, what does that mean? What do I need to do to make this better? The deadline funnel type functionality for the lead magnet strategy, all these things are rolling out into our toolbox suite. So if either A, you can't switch providers for whatever reason because you're too entrenched and it's a non-starter, or you're doing things that are interesting, but you're not necessarily a fit for our kind of clientele, we want to be able to offer a suite of tools that can help you get 70 or 80% of the way of what we can provide you, especially in scenarios where it's not feasible to be a full-blown Campaign Refinery user where we're actually sending your email on your behalf. We want to give you all the components and scaffolding to support.
And then maybe that helps those people become possible good fits because now their numbers are better and what have you. I'm sure it's not just numbers. It's probably not just numbers based. There's probably some markets that you don't want.
Yeah, there's some. A lot of it has to do with where your lead's coming from, how high is your complaint rate, right? So like one component of the Google Postmaster Tools integration, for example, I think will be really useful because most people aren't treating Google Postmaster Tools like their temple, like I do. I'm in there every single day looking at reputations and complaints and authentication errors, but that's not normal behavior for most marketers.
Right.
So having a system that will alert them is not only useful for them, but then it also gives us a really nice guiding metric so we can start to see who are the high quality senders. So when you do come to apply, we have some history of your reputation or your reputation progress so that we can see, okay, you've gone from here to here and we think we can take you to here.
Yeah.
Great. Now that's something we can work with. They've shown progress.
Something that happened to me, and I should mention we're well over the hour. That's why Tellman and I each had to disappear for a second because we're over. I don't know. Tellman's not over 50. We're over 45.
Well, we're both drinking a gallon of water a day because we're doing.
And we're also drinking a gallon of water with this. So 75 hard. So anyway, I was my website was hacked. My solo ad company's website itself was hacked to a point where they actually put up like phishing pages onto my site. So what was happening, and I'm talking about my internal customer list, they would click on something and they wouldn't get there. Like basically you could see that they would click on it and they got blocked. So I got added to a block list. Now over time, my postmaster reputation didn't change. It was a totally different block list. and that was fun. Um, but that was a little harder to get back. Honestly, it's over. It took many months, and I actually even changed domain name. I still send from the same domain because my sender reputation stayed fine, but the actual like domain that people were landing on was getting blocked, and I feel like that's something I'd never seen before. Is that anything that you ever have run into?
You can imagine we've seen just about everything
Yeah. Okay.
in terms of I mean, you send billions of emails and you're going to run into just about every corner case possible. And then,
Yeah.
some will be invented probably since we've been on this 1 hour call
That's
that
right.
didn't exist beforehand that we'll run into shortly, right? So,
Yeah.
Well, so Travis, I'm guessing you've probably already thought of this, but if you haven't, please do. Is if with your toolbox rollout, I can say from experience, like if you want to take someone that's already established and they're ingrained, they're working with another system or company, but they want better deliverability, they want more tools. Making it really easy to do that part that you mentioned earlier about spending 15 seconds a day to do the 150, but making it really easy for the clickers, the people that do actually do something on the old system, to be able to be imported and moved over to Campaign Refinery automatically when they become a clicker and move them right over. And maybe it's as simple as a Zapier integration, but that would be sweet, just make it really easy to scrape the cream off the top essentially, and then move them forward in Campaign Refinery.
so one of the things in the toolbox is actually going to be a Zapier alternative. That will be,
great. Perfect. Okay. So you're
yes.
definitely already way ahead of me on that. That's great.
Yeah, that'll
So
be out.
so
sooner
it's
than people
okay that
realize.
it's that opening clicker that was mailed from whatever, let's say Get Response, which is a different. I guess it's not a different IP address because it's using my.
Different IP address. Yeah.
It's a different. The SMTP is a different IP address that it's coming over to Campaign Refinery. It doesn't. There's not a little quality degradation. I guess as long as things are going well over at Campaign Refinery and you're having above 40-50% open rate, then it should work out.
So anytime that you're sending from a new infrastructure, even if you have an existing high domain reputation, the fact that you're sending from a new set of computers and you have a new set of IPs and a new configuration in general, it is going to change the calculus a little bit from the ISPs, the Googles, the Microsofts, the Yahoos. But that can be a good thing if your highest quality leads are moving over to one. It's like, okay, well, everything that comes from this infrastructure over here, get me on camera, this infrastructure over here is really, really good. So new leads coming over, fantastic. They're going to inbox like crazy, and so siphoning off your best leads is great so long as you're managing your suppression and you are unsubscribing them from the old system.
Right.
Because you don't want to accidentally be mailing them the same lead from two systems, because if they unsubscribe from one, manually, you don't want to accidentally send them from another, because your likelihood of
I
complaints.
definitely do that now and don't suppress. Thank you.
Actually, Travis, this is a question that's come up in several conversations that I've had, and no one's given me a definitive answer yet, which is quite simply, if you're mailing from two separate services like Keep and Campaign Refinery, and you're doing the whole siphon maneuver, right, or whatever, right, or any of the other 1,000 email services that are out there that might not be going so well for somebody. If we're mailing out from the same domain and email address, right? Say Tellman at Overcome Everything or whatever, from those two separate services, is that bad news? Like, is one going to have a bad influence on the other? Should I be mailing out from a totally different domain name if we start up with Campaign Refinery, or should we be using the same one? Or should we be using a subdomain of the same one?
Are there a lot of the same people in both lists?
Well, so it's kind of two different questions. So Tellman's question is about having a top level domain shared across multiple sending platforms.
Yep.
Your question, Fellman, is more about just suppression in general. So I will start by saying, if you're going to mail people on multiple platforms, especially if it's the same group of people, maybe you have different applications for how you decide to use it, you must have a synced suppression list so that if anyone unsubscribes from any platform, they're unsubscribed from both.
Every time, yeah.
If you're trying to migrate, the goal is as soon as they are claimed by the other system that you're migrating to, you should immediately be unsubscribing them from the old system to avoid any overlap or issue. That answers the suppression question.
Okay.
From the domain and reputation and authentication piece, I'm not going to say it depends.
Yeah.
It does a little bit though, because what it depends on though is how the two systems are configured. And what I mean by that is, for example, we're obsessed with knowing what your reputation is explicitly for email that you send out of Campaign Refinery.
Yeah.
To achieve that, what we're doing is we are technically signing a subdomain of R1 and R2, but the email that they see that it's from and the email that they reply to is your top level domain. So what that means is that the user experience is the same, right? Let's say you're from Infusionsoft as it is from Campaign Refinery in terms of who they see, who it's from. But we are signing a subdomain so that in Google Postmaster Tools, we can actually see your domain reputation specific to the volume you're sending from us, and your complaint rate specific to the volume you're sending from us. Okay, and that is a very specific, like intentional product decision that we made. Not every platform works that way, and it is possible for multiple platforms to try to be signing and sending from the same exact top level domain or the same exact subdomain, right? We do not advise that,
right?
Because then you have no isolation and you get a lot of crossover of negative reputation dragging down the other one. That's a second reason why we sign a subdomain. So by doing it that way, it isolates you a little bit. It's not a complete firewall, but it is a little bit of an isolation.
But we might be on somebody might be on two other platforms that don't automatically assign a subdomain. So now you've got this list over on, we've mentioned Aweber before, and this list on MailChimp or whatever. And I don't know if MailChimp's a bad example, but anyway, and they are like, this one could drag this one down.
Yeah, if they're both signing on the same version of the domain, then they have an influence on each other about what that reputation is.
So the short answer is,
Ken Netty mentioned this, right? Subdomain, yeah.
So if you're going to be mailing out from on two different platforms through the same email address and the same domain, use subdomains that are different for both of them.
Now, I want to be really, really clear to people that are listening about subdomains, though. If you are choosing to have a subdomain that is visible on who that's from, like let's some people use at email dot their domain or something like that, please go look at how that's actually configured. Does that page of email dot whatever have content? Does it have terms and conditions? Does it have a privacy policy? Does the who is information for your overall domain, is it still visible, or is it behind a proxy service, which is a negative? There's a lot of things about how that's configured, and so
so that domain name, if it's
that
visible,
URL, right,
that has to have.
Has to look legit.
Yeah, has to be legit.
It needs to be legit. Yeah.
Can it just redirect to the actual homepage?
You can. I don't love that, but that is technically an option.
Dude, somebody's just got to write the Deliverability Bible and keep updating this thing, because
that's what he's doing. He's got the tools and he's got 400 articles and YouTube videos.
Well, I distill the vast majority of things you have to know in terms of technical and a bit of strategical things, like the subdomain thing, like the who is privacy stuff, into a free training, which is called the Inbox Formula, which
I've seen that. Yeah.
And that is not only, I legitimately think, really compelling content, because it's like literally it's kind of a playbook, like do this, make sure you have this squared away. But it also, when you opt in for it, you get to see that cool expiring experience we talked about earlier. So
where do people go? So where should people go to check out your stuff, dude?
Yeah. So obviously there's campaignrefinery.com in general, which you had put up before. If they want to see the Inbox Formula, I can either go grab the link for that for you real quick, or they can go into the footer on our homepage under training. There's lead magnet multiplier if they want to see how the sausage is made for the expiring stuff, or they can go to the Inbox Formula, which is not only the actual deliverability training, but to see in action the lead magnet multiplier sort of technique executed.
You mean they can click on Inbox Formula, or they can go to inboxformula.com?
No, it's
they
not at
can,
inboxformula.com. He's saying it's in the footer of Campaign Refinery.
Yeah.
yeah.
So we should
Also,
just send people to Campaign Refinery, realistically.
Yeah, at Campaign Refinery, look in the footer for the inbox. It's not inbox formula. It's the multiplier, right?
Yeah.
well, yeah, and then I'll give this link to you guys in the
Okay,
chat.
great.
You can choose to do with that as you please, but
Yeah, we'll put it in the comments.
yeah, that's the actual download for it. But we also have pop-ups for it around the site, that kind of thing too, so you can experience it a few different ways. But like I said, my goal for that was to be better than most people's paid email deliverability trainings, and
Nice.
I think we succeeded.
Oh, it's free.
Yep, totally free, as long as you click in the first 10 minutes.
Nice.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Travis, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you jumping on the show and sharing some of your long, hard-won experience and wisdom in the wonderful wide world of email marketing. And
And you know what? I mean, thanks for going to the trouble of creating it, and all the content that you create, because it is a really, really big problem amongst a lot of, our friends and fellow marketers. And yeah, it's you're definitely coming from the right place doing it. And I'm glad it's been so successful as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're human. We make mistakes. We don't get everything right. But at the end of the day, we understand that it's a big, complicated problem, but it has a high value associated to that because it really makes a meaningful difference for a lot of people when they get it right. And so, let me take my scars and millions of dollars in personal investment and try to make that worthwhile for everybody. And
Yeah, right on.
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
that's cool.
I mean, I'm not calling you Mother Teresa or anything. You're just helping people deliver emails, but we do appreciate the attention.
Someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not a saint because of it, but it does matter.
Exactly.
right.
Well, thank you so much for being on, and sorry we went over by a little bit, but the information is really just so good, and it was good hearing your beginning story as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Rock and roll. Thanks so much. All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you on Monday.
Bye. See you Monday. Have a great weekend. Not you.